So first of all, happy Disability Pride Month. I did intend to put this video out in June, but life got some patch updates, and since there's definitely some overlap and intersection of these areas, I figured better late than never. In this video, I plan on discussing my own experience identifying with a xenogender label, specifically catgender, because I don't see a lot of videos that are by someone who actually identifies as a label talk about their own experience, aside from maybe some small short form stuff here and there. This video isn't really meant to go over xenogenders in a broad lens. There's a million videos that already achieve that, and if you clicked on this video and you don't know what a xenogender is, I really don't know what you hope to gain from this. I just also don't feel like there's a way that I could describe this label that would encompass everyone who might choose to identify as a xenogender, or even the specific xenogender that I identify as, because people are very different and experiences, especially with gender, are very subjective. Really, this video is just meant to bring a bit of perspective and, for lack of better terms, humanize people who use xenogender labels, as well as just share a little bit of queer joy. I'll also kind of preface this with that, in my own personal opinion, I know that I am kind of a bad representative for xenogender labels, if only because I feel that I do embody a lot of the negative stereotypes that people have of them. For example, I do have several disabilities, both physical and psychological disabilities. You know, anyone of any level of ability or neurotype may choose to identify as a xenogender, use that label, but it's really, you will often see it framed in a way that people who have certain mental illnesses, especially autism, are doing it because they don't know better how to label their own subjective experience, which is just tinged with so much ableism about stripping people who you know are or perceive as disabled, as not being able to make their own choices, to be able to dictate their own experience, which is just horrible. But, you know, in my case, being catgender collectively is framed by this brain being fixated on cats. Well, animal husbandry in general, but especially cats from a very young age. They are a very great source of comfort to me. As I'm filming this, I'm next to one of my Aurora snow leopard plushes, so you can kind of get an idea. And I also think I've got Chuck, who is the Whiskas Russ promotional plush. But it's just a source of comfort and also a main point of how I process the world. And I think a lot of people, when they discuss special interests, forget that when you talk about them in a clinical sense, it's, you know, how people with different neurotypes process the world, how they develop their schemas for social interaction, and it's a deeply ingrained part of their brain. It's really no wonder then, if I have that sort of fixation, that it is how cats present themselves is something that factors into how I view the kind of arbitrary demanded performance of gender. And kind of a tangent to this as well, another reason that I might not be the best example to draw on is that I'm not opposed to the idea of having cat-like features if that was really a viable transition option, which it's not. That's something they're making up. This isn't necessarily even related to the gender label. It is definitely more related to psychological and physical disability experiences, particularly motor difficulties and specific traumas. But it also kind of overlaps with the experience of that alter human label, which is just an umbrella term for people who do not at least fully identify as human. And there's a lot of conflation there. Those two things are separate and sometimes they do overlap. But transhumanism is not innately part of being xenogender. And I guess another hit is just hobby-wise. A lot of people do conflate xenogender labels with just being a furry, and that's a hobby in a community that people, including me, consciously engage in, and it is not this core, immutable part of themselves, at least not to the same extent. It is still voluntary in a way that gender identity just isn't. So the kind of general summary of that portion was just, I do kind of fit into that stereotype people really have in their head when they hear a label like catgender or xenogender in general. And that's not my fault, nor does it diminish my identity, but I just wanted to clarify again that that's just my personal experience and not everyone who uses the label, or really anyone necessarily, is going to have the exact same experience I do. So without further ado, I'll just kind of give a brief overview of how I got into the label. If you were one to believe in the Born This Way case, I suppose you could definitely make it for me. Allegedly, I've been meowing since I was an infant. So when I first encountered the idea of xenogenders to kind of get on this path was in very late middle school via a group of, at the time, close friends. They were reading out the biographical about information on somebody's blog page who had kind of been reposted in a compilation of, oh, look at these people on the internet, they're so cringy and different and silly. And, looking at that in retrospect, it shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did that these people did end up making fun of me behind my back for completely different reasons. But the person in question who we're looking at, it's been obviously a long while, and I have no idea what their URL for that website was. But the person in question was fairy gender and using fae, phase, fae self pronouns. And I believe they were also otherkin of some sort of forest spirit. They were just so interesting and so sound in their identity, and it was something that enamored deeply. But seeing both the reactions they had in this compilation as well as the ridicule my friends had for this person just really sent me back into the closet there, and I didn't really consider it much until much later on. I would say probably about 3 years ago, and funny enough, it comes back to blogging, my own personal blog. I was doing this little game amongst friends who also run their own blogs there, and it was just, how do you think of the person who runs this blog looks? Obviously, online safety, not using actual pictures. And at the time, I wasn't really IDing as any sort of xenogender, just transmasculine and genderqueer of some sort, but I had, from prior experiences, had been kind of too nervous to even peel back those layers there. But I did have a friend at the time who was not into this blogging sphere. They were also trying to court me romantically. That's another long story for another day, perhaps. But they were very insistent that I must be dog-like. So when I was doing this, it was through a little online doll maker. If I can find it, I'll link it. But they had a cat gender pride pin, and I thought that would really enhance the dichotomy between perception and what I was actually like if I did make myself a style maker. But the first few images came out, and immediately I was met with comments from these friends asking, "Oh, do you identify as cat gender? That's cool," or "That makes sense." And it made me turn inwards, and I was given this opportunity to really think about myself, how I viewed myself, and what really shaped me, and what really shaped that kind of space of gender queerness that was outside of a binary view. And most of all, I thought about how that label of cat gender made me feel, and it was euphoric. It just felt like home in a sense, and that's really what was important. I mean, I did reflect on it a little bit more about how my gender, how I saw myself, was all wrapped up in that fixation there. It was kind of giving a name to this space in between that I knew I fit into. And that's all I really needed to know. That the label made sense and it made me happy. And I've been using it ever since. And I've been, learning more and more about how specifically I fall into this label and what really makes me happy. It really opened the door for even further exploration, like just last month, pretty middle of the month there, I looked into paw neopronouns in kind of a similar vein of, oh wow, those really make sense for me. Those kind of bring that same feeling of joy. Those all wrap into the picture. So yeah, I guess if you needed a sign to try out a label that you've been kind of hesitant on, there it is. Queer joy is so important, and life is so short to not take those moments to reflect, to advocate for yourself, to give yourself space to be wrong, but also to be right, and to find that there is even more joy to be found in your identity and how you use that to navigate yourself and your interactions. So, do what feels right for you in that moment and find the community that will uplift you in those times of discovery. I definitely have. And that's about it. Really, that label is not as complicated as someone might think. That's really all I have for you today. My Ko-Fi is linked in the description, as silly as it sounds. I think looking into a cattail would be very gender affirming, so a little bit of funds there would definitely help. But have a great day, and I love you, and I hope you find some labels and some community that bring you joy, both this month and just whenever you're finding this.